Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Million Pound Mission Podcast. It's your buddy Adam, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and this is episode number 371. We are biohacking for optimal health with my friend Angela Foster, and I'm excited to dive into this one because it's a topic that we have not really done a deep dive on ever in the show, and I get asked a lot of questions about it. First, a couple quick announcements. If you guys are looking for some coaching to hammer through the holiday season here as it fastly and quickly approaches, now is a great time to hop on board with that. You can apply for one-on-one coaching with me, the PhD, your buddy Adam, at millionpoundmission.com, and we can get you in. I'm going to be raising my prices in January, so now is a great time to hop in, get some support, and help you, I'm going to help you navigate the holidays, which is a struggle zone for a lot of people. So if that sounds like something that you need, hop on over to the website, millionpoundmission.com. All right, breaking news, big announcement. Like, this may catch some of you guys by surprise. And so I'm just going to put it out there. We've got 5 episodes left of the Million Pound Mission podcast. And before you freak out, in January, so we're going to go through the end of the year here. I've been kicking around some ideas. I've been soul searching a little bit, including this one. So episode 375 will be the final episode of the Million Pound Mission podcast. Good news is you're not going to have to go anywhere in 2021 in the same feed here. It's just going to be rebranded, a little more niche down with our topic. I'll be explaining that over the next few weeks, and I'm bringing in some co-hosts potentially here. Again, I'll start dripping some spoilers out there, but January 2021, we're gonna hit the ground running, and it's gonna be amazing. So you won't have to go anywhere. We're gonna keep inspiring you. We're gonna keep talking about how to get as healthy as possible, but we're just gonna do a little pivot in 2021. All right, so let's talk about biohacking. And the topic of biohacking is something that I get asked about frequently. And since I got a C- in chemistry and I pretty much hated biology class, I figured it was time to tag in an expert in the field to deliver some great biohacking tips for us here today. And my friend Angela Foster is a leading female biohacker, a certified health and performance coach. And she uses a combination of modern science, such as DNA analysis, along with time-honored holistic practices to transform her clients' health, energy, and performance. And in this episode of the podcast, Angela and I discuss the one biohacking tip she would give us right off the start for some immediate results. We talk about how DNA testing can help us optimize how we eat and how we exercise. And we talk about the biggest mistake Angela sees people make when they're out there trying to be biohackers. This is a really good one. This is a deep dive. I think a lot of you will be served well that have had questions in this area. And again, I got a C- in science, so this is a much better alternative than me trying to figure out how the heck to biohack. Angela knows it all, and she delivers in this episode. So without any further delay, let's check out episode number 371, Biohacking for Optimal Health with Angela Foster. All right, Angela Foster, welcome to the Million Pound Mission podcast. How are we doing today, my friend?
I'm great. Thanks, Adam. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm really excited because I think you're going to be able to deliver on a few topics that I definitely know my audience is interested in and that we haven't really covered. Like, we are approaching 400 episodes, and like that's saying something. If I haven't covered it yet, that's saying something. So you're a bit of an expert when it comes to biohacking and our DNA and how we can optimize our body based off of that information. So I would love to start off with the story about how you became really interested in and known as like this biohacking expert. So let's start there.
Okay, great. So I started life as a lawyer, actually, as a corporate lawyer. So a bit of a career change. And as you probably know, corporate lawyers work crazy hours, night and day, long weekends. And pretty much that was my life in my 20s. And I was kind of gunning for partnership. And then I made partnership in a large law firm when I was about 8 months pregnant with our first son. And I think nothing kind of prepared me for what was going to hit me basically over the next few years. I had 3 kids in 4.5 years, and it was all a bit mental, and there was a background, I think, probably of some adrenal dysfunction in terms of how much I'd pushed myself, kind of surviving on caffeine and energy bars. And then my kids all had reflux. They weren't sleeping. It was a bit messy, I guess. And I struggled with what we call postnatal. I think you guys call postpartum. And it was particularly bad after my third child. So at this point, my mental health was taking a toll. My physical health was, I was getting repeated chest infections. And then I ended up actually being rushed into hospital with suspected lung cancer and having CT scans. They knew I was sick at the time with pneumonia, but they thought there was something more going on. And it turned out it was just really bad viral and bacterial pneumonia. And so I was in a position where I was really sort of fighting for my life. And it was a huge turning point for me because it was a wake-up call, thinking I need to turn this around. And when I came out of hospital, which I was just so grateful to make a full recovery from, I decided at first it was just for my own benefit, really. I was going to find out, well, how can I get really, really healthy? How can I really go to the other extreme now? And I'd always been into exercise and eating well, but I then kind of focused on biohacking. I trained as a nutritional therapist and a holistic health coach. And then I started to work with some clients and get great results. I started diving into the world of genetics, which in DNA, which I know you're keen to talk about in a bit. And then it was really initially, it was like, well, how can you combine high performance with optimal health? And then what I realized was optimal health on a sustained basis is really the foundation of high performance. And so that I kind of all grew from there, basically.
So at what point did you say, like, all right, the law career is done? Was that while all the pregnancies were happening, or was that after you got sick, or was that after you started to dive into the world of biohacking?
Yeah, so initially I took it as a bit of a career break when I was trying to cope with my young children, and I thought I'd go back to it. And then I just got so into this world of health optimization. And I realized that my passion was there so much more than anything I'd ever done with law. I mean, maybe it's hard to be passionate about corporate law, I don't know, but this was definitely a newfound passion of mine. And so I kind of couldn't leave it alone, and I just wanted to help people. Then I made that shift and decided, right, I'm not going to, because for a while, actually, I was sort of training to become a judge. Once you've
Really?
been practicing for a certain time, you can become a judge. So I was going down that road. So a bit of a switch.
Yeah, a slight shift. I think it's interesting. I've interviewed, a handful of female entrepreneurs, more than a handful, that are really going dead set on a certain career path, and then they give birth and they have children, and things just totally shift and change. And obviously, that's an experience that no man is ever going to really fully understand. So I think it's fascinating when it seems like it just makes you shift your priorities a little bit, and and men don't experience that. It takes something else. Usually, like, we have to have some like major disease or something for, like, well, I better start taking care of myself. But women, they have that experience of birth, and they realize that there's other person that they've nurtured in their body for 9 months, and now they're responsible for them. And they start to make these pivots with, I can't work 80-hour work weeks. That doesn't make sense. Like, this other thing has shifted my thinking. So any thoughts around that whole experience, or that thought pattern?
Yeah, I think, as you say, I think you summed it up really well. I think it just changes your focus so dramatically. And when you have that baby, you're 100% responsible for them. And as you kind of start moving away from breastfeeding and weaning them on food, you start to think, like, what am I putting into this child? Like, how can I make a difference? How can I give them the right food and energy, but also how can I give them the right thoughts? Particularly for me, as someone who struggled with depression and with my mental health on kind of quite a long-term basis, it took around 10 years to really fully recover. It really dawned on me that actually we're kind of molding these little humans, and how can I put positivity in them in terms of the nutrition, in terms of lifestyle, in terms of thinking and energy and everything else. And so I think it does definitely shift things. And I, as you rightly pointed out there, I became very aware that I couldn't work those hours and do all of the marketing as a young partner in a law firm and do everything else they required of me, and actually spend time with my children. And it was quite clear that I would then be an absent parent, really, Monday to Friday. And I didn't want to do that. I think, I fell in love with each of them every time I had the next baby, and I didn't want to leave them.
That's one of the biggest shifts I've had mindset wise. I refer to myself now as a recovering gym owner. I sold my gym in December. Now I'm just a full-time podcaster, but having that ability to handle my family situation and really dive in as a dad, and with the pandemic and taking care of their school and being the dad and the teacher and the person providing meals and doing all this stuff, and just the ability to do that and not worry about working so much and putting all that into people outside of my family. It's a hard decision to make, but I feel like it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. So I think we're on the same wavelength there, Angela. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about biohacking, because this is something I get questions about this all the time. Like, what's the thing I should do? What's the little thing that's going to shorten my learning curve or give me the best optimal results? So let's tease one thing out first. That's kind of that maybe an overarching biohack that, as far as overall health, what's one tip that you think people should at least consider that would give us the most noticeable results, just broad brush across our overall health status?
So the biggest thing is to try and turn your body into a fat burning machine. Become a fat burner, and you'll see dramatic results in terms of your body composition, your energy, your mental clarity, and your focus. And when you do that, and there's multiple ways that people can go about doing this, and I can definitely share some hacks, but I would say that's the biggest thing. When you go from burning glucose to burning fat, you look better, you feel better, and you just don't have the mood swings and the cravings and everything else. And that doesn't mean that you need to go full keto. That's not what I mean necessarily here. I don't advocate one form of diet or another. I think we have to, that's why I look at people's DNA and see what might suit them the best, and look for any kind of gaps we might need to fill and support. But definitely people need to get onto being a fat burner, basically.
Okay, let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit, because we definitely have a large ketogenic diet, low carb, even carnivore community that listens in. I kind of bounce around those three areas, but keto is kind of my home. That's where I live currently. So by becoming a fat burner, like what are some ways that we can definitely do that and get that fat burning going strong?
So definitely, first of all, I'd say everybody needs to be fasting for a significant period of the day. That needs to be a minimum of 12 hours. Like, there's pretty much nobody that doesn't suit a 12-hour overnight fast, even right down to a 5-year-old. You're going to sleep lots better. And when we sleep better, we actually regulate certain hormones much better as well. So things like ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin tells us when we're hungry, and leptin tells us when we're full. Those hormones are better regulated. So is insulin. I did like a month of basically tracking my blood glucose, and the effect that sleep and sleep disruption had on my blood sugar was just profound, even when I wasn't changing what I was eating. And cortisol, also being very, very stressed, raises blood sugar. So I think that people need to have a 12-hour overnight fast. Whether or not you go longer is very individual. And I know you mentioned that a lot of your listeners are female. And I think this is where we need to be careful, because if they are pre-menopausal, so they're still ovulating, then having extended fast can actually sometimes just drive cortisol in the body too high. And that can actually have the opposite effect to what people are wanting, because when cortisol is high for any length of time, it's quite catabolic. So it breaks down muscle tissue. And as you'll know, muscle is kind of much more energy demanding, and it helps with insulin sensitivity. So we kind of burn about 7 times the number of calories with muscle than we do with body fat. So we definitely want to preserve our lean mass. And so what I would say is you need to understand what's known as your allostatic load. So how much stress have you got going on in terms of everything? Like, are you a mum like me that's running around with 3 children and running their business and the podcast and everything else? For me, doing that and coupling it with, say, lots of HIIT training and extended fasts, there's seasons in life. This would not be the season for me to do that, doing 20-hour fast, for example. So I would fast anywhere on a daily basis between 12 and sometimes up to 16 hours, but I wouldn't say I regularly do 16 hours. So we definitely want to get the body burning fat by fasting, but we don't want to necessarily push it too hard, depending on what else we've got going on, and just hormonally in terms of what decade we're in as well.
I love the way you describe seasons of life, because I feel like people, especially in the weight loss mindset, they think forever. Like, what am I going to have to do this forever? We'll have to fast for 20 hours forever. We'll have to do ketogenic diet forever. Or they'll be on the other side going, I need to find the thing that I can do forever. And I'm like, that's forever's a long time. Like, Science happens, options change, our life changes. So I love thinking about things in seasons like you described it. And like, okay, what the season that I'm in, even within the next 28 days, with the goals that I have and the way that my body's feeling, what strategy fits that the best? What's the lowest hanging fruit that we can pluck off there? And fasting is a tool that I've used personally. And I've noticed personally, I've talked about this a few times. My friend Alexa Sherm from Simple Roots Radio, she made this recommendation to me because I was like, I understand the benefits of intermittent fasting. I want to do it, but I was eating between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. and I wasn't sleeping well. And because I eat a lot of calories, I eat 4,000 calories a day just to kind of maintain my body weight now that I've lost all this weight. And I wasn't sleeping well and I was getting indigestion and acid reflux. And she goes, okay, move your eating window up from 9, maybe you eat from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. And then you have more hours between when you eat your last meal and between when you go to bed. And that was like the magic bullet for me of my digestion was much better and I was sleeping so much better. So you guys can play around with your window of when you're actually consuming food, and that might make a difference as well. So that seems to make sense with what you said. Would you agree with that, Angela?
100%. I think what you say is a great point that you make there. And actually, in terms of circadian alignment and improving sleep, eating earlier in the day is better. So we have these clock genes, all over our body and our organs. So yeah, big thumbs up there. It's definitely better to move that eating window earlier. And I find that, I track my sleep with my Aura ring. And what I find is that if I'm eating, 2 to 3 hours before bed, my heart rate will stay elevated for quite a long time during the night. And also my heart rate variability, which is the variation between heartbeats. And the heart is not meant to beat as a metronome. It's meant to have variation between beats. I find that the heart rate variability is that much lower. And so you can see that pressure on the cardiovascular system, which you don't want. And it's just preventing you getting into that lovely, deep, restful sleep and also getting enough rapid eye movement. So yeah, you're spot on there.
So you mentioned a biohacking tool called the Aura Ring,
Yes.
which I'm interested in. There are different little tools like that. There's like the Whoop band, there's the Aura Ring, there's some, different apps and things that people use. And I get questions around this. And this is an area that I'm not real experienced with. And I'm curious about as well. Like, what is the Aura Ring your go-to for like biofeedback, or what kind of tech are you using personally that you think the average consumer might consider using?
So I think the Aura Ring, I've looked at both. I haven't used the Whoop personally myself. I've looked at it with clients. I think the data there is a little bit more confusing. I think it's probably geared at the athletic market a little bit more. I like Aura because you can turn it to airplane. You're not getting any kind of extra EMF radiation on it. It just like communicates when you want it to with your phone. And it tracks your HRV at night. And so definitely for someone like me, who's is a type A personality and will push themselves too hard, it's a great metric because I can see what's happening and know when I need to dial things back. And obviously recovery is more important than the training itself almost. So I find Aura is great. I went to a lecture actually in London with Matthew Walker, who wrote the book Why We Sleep. And he obviously does a lot of research in the laboratories in California. And I was talking to him about wearable devices. He wears the Aura. And so he said, it probably is still only 60% compared to a lab, but it's pretty much the best that we have around in terms of accuracy. And because you're also tracking that data against your own data, you're only comparing against yourself, that makes it even more kind of usable and relevant. And it definitely shows you, like it will notice, should I say, any kind of micro wake-ups. Whereas a lot of these things, they don't. If you're lying still and you're awake, it hasn't picked up on the fact that you're awake. It gives you like 0.1 degree changes in terms of centigrade on your body temperature. So you can also see when you're getting sick earlier than you're maybe feeling it as well. So there's lots of stuff there. I think if someone wanted to track something like heart rate variability to actually modulate it, then that wouldn't be the right device, because you can't, even though they allow you to do like a snapshot and it will take it, it's not a long enough period to really get an idea of what your HRV is during the day. Aura looks at it at nighttime while you're resting. So if you wanted to then actually have the ability to really monitor in real time what's going on and whether, for example, breath work or meditation is having a real impact, then using something like the Polar H10 is a really affordable way of doing it. So that's a chest strap that Polar do, and you can pair that with an app called Elite HRV, and you can actually get real-time readings.
Nice. Nice. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to end up getting an Aura ring. I think you just talked me into it. As a health podcaster, my audience and my podcaster friends kind of make fun of me because I always try to get things for free first. So I've always been like, I'm DMing Aura ring on Instagram. I'm like, hey, I've got a show. Let's talk sponsorship. Maybe we could do a trade out. And I usually get stuff free. Like I've got a free $5,000 infrared sauna by using this technique, but Aura it's crickets. So I gotta either find somebody with an in, or I'm gonna have to buy one. But I think it's worth the investment, and then I can podcast about it. So that's a business expense, right?
Yes, a business expense. I think it's very difficult to get a free Aura. Actually, you're right. Very, very difficult. So I'm not sure even how much they're giving out discount codes anymore.
Yeah, yeah, they're out there. Like that name's out there. They are self promoting. So okay, let's dive into DNA. This is another zone that I get a lot of questions on. And I think we have to be careful when we go to like, okay, optimizing versus like just getting the foundation right. Sometimes people want to like jump steps and their fitness and nutrition foundation isn't quite there yet, but then they start stressing out about DNA readings and like, but I'm not optimal for my DNA. And I'm like, well, let's just stop drinking Diet Coke all the time. How about that? Like let's start there. And I know sometimes people get into that. Well, if it's not optimal, it's not worth doing at all sort of mindset. So let's talk DNA testing. Let's talk a little bit of optimization, but also through the lens of like, okay, this is a different level once we get our foundation in place. So let's dive into this conversation here, Angela.
Okay, sure. So as you say, you're absolutely right. You've got to get the foundations right. So you need to be eating a whole food diet. Yeah, there's no point really in looking at your DNA. You're going to get so many results doing from what we've spoken about already in terms of putting in that daily fasting period, optimizing your sleep. We didn't talk about movement. We can in a moment. That's really, really key as well. And then actually eating a whole food diet. People then start to worry how many carbs I'm eating, how much I'm eating of this and that. If you've got those 4 foundations in place and then you manage stress, you're pretty much going a long way there. The DNA is the faster track to understanding what makes the difference to you and your body. So it removes the guesswork. So if you really want to get superior results, it's taking away the guesswork. Now, the most important thing about DNA is it's the epigenetics. So the epigenome sits above the genome, and we have these tags that go on, which are basically created by our lifestyle and environment. And that's what we're trying to do, is understand at a baseline level. I always say to people, if you think about a computer, like a laptop, and your body is like the laptop, then your DNA is the software program that it's running on. And everything in your environment is constantly communicating with it. And what we really want to do is just upgrade that software or get it to work in the best way that it possibly can. So it's the epigenetics that's key. Doesn't mean it's expressed. These are really like signposts, road markers. Yeah. So I'll give you some examples. So I am very sensitive to carbohydrates, and I can see that on my DNA test. And in my 20s, that was playing out for me in real time. So I had PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. They were prescribing me metformin, which is it's actually a biohacking drug for longevity, but it's also really primarily used for diabetics and controlling insulin levels. So we could see that gene was being triggered and playing out for me. And understanding my genetics was very helpful, because by going low carb actually enabled me to put my PCOS into remission. So I had to have quite extensive surgery, and now it hasn't reappeared, and I conceived all my children naturally. So it's super, super useful to understand things like that. But as you say, you want to get the basics right first. Also, if you're going to do like a ketogenic diet for any length of time, right? So if you're like, I love that diet, I'm going to be doing this for years, it's worth understanding a bit about your genetics and just seeing most of like cholesterol that we have in our blood is actually made by our bodies. It's not down to what we eat. But there are some people who are more sensitive to saturated fats, and they do better on a more kind of Mediterranean paleo style diet. So I'm a huge fan of anything that is low carb. I think that most of the population eat too many carbs, but within those nuances of looking at how many fats do I have, what proportion of saturated fats, how do I really structure my diet, then I think it can be helpful to understand. And it can also show you, because you only need to do it once, your genetics is not going to change. You can then think, right, okay, so if I am going to do that style of diet, I need to pay attention to my blood markers. I'm going to get those tested annually and see where I am. So it's very useful in that sense. And then there's a whole host of other information on it that we can go into if you want.
Yeah. So I think my next line of question would be, where do we go to get the test done? And then how do we understand what the heck it means? Like that's like, we know like why we need to do it now and what the results could be or the benefits. But that's where I always get hung up. I'm like, I got a C- in chemistry in college. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to understand this DNA testing. So how can somebody that gets C- in chemistry do this, Angela? Help me out.
Let me help you. So there are lots of companies that do it, and they give you raw data, which is probably what you've heard of, and then it's like really complicated, or you put it through some kind of algorithm and you can't make sense of it. What I do is I work a lot with a company who tests, like they do 31 million data points and they put it in an app that's a really usable form. But then what I've also done is put together a program that takes you over 90 days of completely understanding all the building blocks that we've just spoken about alongside DNA. So I break down every bit of the results so that you can watch videos and really, really understand that. And that's in a Live Younger, Longer blueprint that I do. And the whole thing is geared to basically help you live younger for longer. And what I found was initially I was doing it with clients, and the consultation was really helpful to them because then they went through the report. But then it was kind of like, wow, that's amazing. That's so much information. And then it gets forgotten about and they're not using it. So I found that videos, just breaking it down and saying, so an example would be your detoxification pathways maybe are impaired a little bit in terms of you have a couple of deletions. Well, that's a huge thing, right? So in terms of detoxifying toxins, but also in terms of things like fat loss, in terms of estrogen and it not being repackaged, it's really important that we optimize those pathways. So if you're slightly impaired at that level, what can you do? And I'll show you lifestyle strategies and foods that you can eat that upregulate these genes. And so that's broken down just into a video on that, a video on fat, a video on carbs, so that people really understand it. And that's actually proved really popular with people because I think now they're like, wow, actually I can now use this information in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting. Like I'm all in. Let's do this. Like that's what I need. Well, that's what's been keeping me from doing something like this. Really, it's just like I don't like wasting my time and I don't like wasting my money, And I feel like it would be both if I just get this sheet and I'm like, what's this mean? Like I got a test done by what's it called, Omega Quant for my omega-3. My
index,
omega,
what the 3 versus 6 index.
Exactly. And I love the way the report broke down because they explained what the levels were at. And they actually emailed me. They're like, you're eating, your omega-3 numbers are showing up like somebody that would lived in like the Paleolithic era because you have such high omega-3 levels. What are you doing? And so I told them like with all my grass-fed meat and my sardines and my cod liver oil and all this stuff. And they're like, this is like, they were fascinated by it. So that was a good experience in something like this. But I think I'm going to dive into what you've got to offer there. So I'll make sure that everybody that's listening in, I'll put that link in the show notes. That way you guys can go and investigate what Angela has there. Now, you mentioned the cholesterol biomarkers for people that are doing low carb, ketogenic, carnivore. I've heard this come up a few times. People are like, sometimes you're just genetically predisposed to bad situations happening with a high fat diet. Can you just dive a little bit deeper into that as far as like what specifically we should be looking at? How do we identify ourselves as like, ooh, maybe not somebody that should be doing keto or low carb?
So what we see is that like there's a very small percentage of the population that have something genetic called familial hypercholesterolemia. And in that situation, it's pretty dangerous. And their arteries become so clogged that if they have 2 copies of that gene, they're probably not going to live past 25. So that's pretty bad. Now, you may have 1 copy, but then there are other genes that you can look at that in the case of what you were saying, for example, with omega-3, omega-6, some people just upregulate those pro-inflammatory omega-6s a bit more. Some people have a higher need for omega-3s. We know that the conversion from plant-based omega-3s, so things like flaxseed and walnuts, actually converting that into usable forms in terms of DHA, DPA, and EPA, we can be as low as 10% in terms of that conversion rate in humans. So it can be pretty poor. So understanding your data around that, which helps to lower inflammation and offset some of that cardiovascular disease risk, can be really important. In terms of the cholesterol, Some people are just more sensitive to saturated fats, and they just need to maybe have more things like olive oil and focus on the monounsaturated fats more. So they could still do a kind of keto-ish style diet, but they're not having as many saturated fats. Similarly, some people, their detoxification pathways are quite quick in terms of they process compounds. So they don't want to be cooking meat and fish to high temperatures or smoking or char grilling it, because that can actually cause these sort of cancerous compounds to be released and moved into the body at a faster rate. So it helps you to understand. But what I say to people is they do need to look at their blood work as well and check what's going on. What are their HDL levels like? What are their LDL levels like? What are their triglycerides? And get a kind of, and their HbA1c, right, which is your long-term blood glucose in terms of the last 2 or 3 months. How sugary have you been? And that's important because we can convert excess sugars to triglycerides in the form of triglycerides in the blood, but also adipose tissue, so body fat. So those things are important. Now, I feel if that data starts to flag up that some of these ratios are wrong, often the doctors will immediately prescribe statins or things like that. And obviously, a lot of people don't want to take that. That's when I think you need to start diving a bit deeper and understanding, well, if you've got a higher LDL, why is that? So first of all, what's causing that LDL? And secondly, what does it look like, those particles? Are they small particles and there are lots of them? And you can do something called Ldl Subfraction Testing. So you can have a really good look at your blood and understand, because it's almost like the artery if you compare it to a highway. And cholesterol is like the taxi. Yeah, so the HDL and the LDL, they're carrying cholesterol, they're carrying fat-soluble vitamins and nutrients, and they're transporting it around the body. And if that highway is nice and clear, there's not much traffic, there's big cars, we've got these big kind of fluffy cholesterol that's going through, it's not such an issue. Whereas if they're really dense and compact, they're much more likely to bump into each other, to cause damage to the arteries and things. So we can actually test to have a look and see what that makeup looks like. And then if you find that actually these results are not looking so good, you can work with a functional medicine practitioner to actually start to identify, well, why is this the case? Is it the diet I'm eating isn't really working for me? Is there something else going on? Like now there's some links with thyroid function, for example. So maybe looking at the health of your thyroid is a good thing. There's been some links with gut health. And these are all really emerging areas. And I'm not a doctor, so I'd never say to anyone, don't take the medication. I'm just saying that you can do both. You can look and understand in terms of, you can look at allopathic medicine, but then you can also look at functional medicine and see, just dive a bit deeper and start to understand why that's happening in your body if you can.
Well, I love that explanation that you just gave, because this is kind of a hot button topic, especially in the low carb, high fat community that I serve. A lot of times it's that I've gone keto, I've gone low carb, 70 to 80% of my calories are coming from fat. Then I go to my doctor, my cholesterol levels are way up, and they're like, take these drugs. No, I don't want to take these drugs. And then the fight happens. So from what you just said, that basically is telling me, okay, we need to go a little bit deeper and start breaking down like what kind of taxis we've got driving through our arteries, basically. And then we can go back and say, we need to make some nutritional adjustments, or, I am at risk from this situation, or I'm not. Would you feel like I'm reading that correctly from you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And understanding what might be causing it, because there's usually a cause in the body. And it may be that it's down to your diet, and maybe there's just a few tweaks, right? Maybe you're not somebody, like we know that having bulletproof coffee and having MCT oil for some people will raise their LDL cholesterol. So let's have a look and see what that LDL looks like. And you can just tweak it slightly. Maybe you're somebody who's going to be predominantly keto, but it's black coffee for you, and you cycle in and out of keto, because also that's associated potentially with better thyroid function as well. So if you're cycling in and out of keto, so you're a lot of people I find really perform well being kind of keto during the day and then having some carbs that help them sleep in the evening meal. And that also helps to create what we call metabolic flexibility, where your body now isn't just a fat burner, but it can burn glucose when it needs to. And that's a much nicer place to be, right? You've got more freedom in terms of what you can eat. It's great for body composition, and it's healthy because you're kind of keeping both areas active within the body.
And you're like the third person in a row that I've interviewed that has used the term metabolic flexibility. And I love it because and my friend Rachel Gregory has a podcast called Metflex and Chill. That's what she talks about, is metabolic flexibility. So yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, she's somebody she's kind of on fire with her brand. So I'll make an introduction. That's a great, you should podcast together
Oh,
for
that would be
sure.
amazing.
But yeah,
Thank you.
that's a hot topic in the low carb space now, is like, okay, how do we kind of have the best of both worlds? And metabolic flexibility is exactly where that is. Now, you mentioned having carbs towards the end of the day. A lot of people are afraid, like, if I eat carbs at night, that's going to make me fat. Like, what would you say to that?
I think that with everything, you've got to test, right? You've always got to test what works with you. A small amount of carbs, I haven't seen that happen for people. I think if you're going to go and really eat loads of carbs, then that's possible. What I would say is carbs and fat, we don't really find in nature together. So normally, if you look at what Mother Nature's given us, the closest we really get to it is coconut flesh, right? Most of the time, she's either giving us protein or carbs or fat, or she might have combined, like lots of foods will have moderate amounts of protein, like all vegetables have that. She doesn't tend to put carbs with fat. And those are what we call the hyperpalatable foods. They're extremely hard to resist. So if you're having those, then sure, I can imagine you're going to see some weight gain. But if you're having a very small amount of like sweet potato or brown rice or something in the evening, I don't generally see that. I see people sleeping better and their thyroid function tends to be better, and they basically seem to be a bit more relaxed. Cortisol drops. So I think it comes down in part to what they're eating and also just testing those quantities. What you can do just to make yourself a bit more insulin sensitive at that time of day is to do some exercise before. So you can do a workout, or you can even do 60 seconds of body weight squats. Is a simple hack while you're at the counter preparing your food, has been shown to improve things like insulin sensitivity. So
Yeah, I think I first read about that in Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Body. He was talking about. Have you read the book?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's the part when he's talking about eating dinner and he's going to do like a cheat meal or a free meal, and he's going into the men's bathroom to do squats to increase his insulin sensitivity. I'm like, that's such a Tim Ferriss thing to say.
Isn't it?
Like, I go to the bathroom and do 100 squats to increase my insulin sensitivity. Yes.
But
So
so simple, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
simple. Because people
yeah,
assume it's got to be really like intense. It's a bit like doing a Tabata workout if you
yeah,
haven't got time. 4
yeah.
minutes and you're done.
Yep.
So
Yep. So what you're saying here, Angela, I'm 6'3". I'm 220. I'm 100 kilos. I'll convert it for it's 100 kilos. I don't know how many stone that is, but I am not a small individual, so I'm not gonna really suffer any fat gain consequences if I eat a sweet potato in the evening after a workout. Like, I'm gonna be all right, right? Tell me I'm gonna be okay,
you're
Angela.
going to be okay.
Oh,
You're
yes.
going to be fine, particularly
Yes.
if you're working out. And also your overall movement's good, right? So we can't
Yep.
just schedule our workouts. I think people forget that. So people are often surprised by how many steps they need to do. And that 10,000 is not a magic number, but it does seem to correlate with better health. And also you're just burning fat when you're moving at that overall kind of endurance. So, and from a mental health perspective, we see people much higher rates of anxiety and depression if you drop below 5,000 steps a day. That's what the science shows. So yeah, just overall activity levels make a huge difference. And muscle, right? If you're that 100 kilos, if you've got a lot of muscle, that's going to really, that sweet potato is so much easier to
Yeah.
have and not worry about.
It's going to go right to my biceps. I'm going to have biceps like my buddy Danny Vegas soon enough. I know it. I just know it.
It's going right
Um,
to my glutes. Just
there
like
you go.
J-Lo.
Just like J-Lo. That's what I'm going for sure. So you mentioned walking. How do you feel about walking? Like, I know a lot of biohackers are really big on like post-meal walks to stabilize blood sugar levels, things like that. Have you noticed any benefits like that just from walking?
Mm. I think if you can do it, it's brilliant. In my experience, a lot of people, particularly like now in the UK, you can probably tell as we've been recording, it's getting dark already. The chances of you going out for a walk after an evening meal in the rain and the wind and it's dark is probably quite slim, unless you have a treadmill to walk on at home. But general overall movement, I think is good. I really like a fasted walk. I just think that's an amazing thing to do before breakfast. Really like that. And if you can, any kind of fasted exercise that's gentle, so we're not pushing cortisol too high, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And also then you're not going to be ridiculously ravenously hungry for the rest of the day. And if you have some caffeine before it, that just helps to really upregulate that fatty acid oxidation as well. So
Now you're talking my language. Caffeine, walking,
there you
glutes.
go.
Those
Cold shower.
cold shower. Okay.
Afterwards.
Cold shower after
Yeah.
working out or after eating? What's optimal there?
Oh, after working out or
Okay.
walking. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Fasted, ideally.
Now I did the whole Wim Hof course. Like I did the course, not
Did
in
you?
person, but I did like the video series
Oh,
and
yeah,
breathing and all
I've
that.
got that.
I still hate cold water. Like I hate cold. Like he's like, it is going to be better. You're going to love it. And I'm like, I hate it. I hate it, Wim. I hate it. But I do periodic, like here in Indiana, I'll jump in my infrared sauna, and then if it's snowing outside, I'll run outside for a little bit and kind of go hot, cold, back and forth a little bit. I can handle that better than I do the cold shower for some reason. It's just like I sit there and I stare at the shower nozzle. I'm like, this is
I can't do this.
terrible. And I'm like, let's do it tomorrow instead. Hot water. So I'm kind of
So you don't have the added benefit of it making your hair shiny. That's the thing. See, us girls, I think we do the cold shower anyway, just because we're brutally vain. So it's like, actually, it makes my hair shine. So I'll just do it anyway. And if I get the fat burn on top, that's all good.
It might make my scalp shine. I don't know. For the podcast listeners that are listening in, I haven't changed my show image. I started shaving my head during the pandemic. So I don't have any like promotional pictures. All the promo pictures have me with hair, and everybody's like, who in the hell is that? So yeah, no hair on this guy anymore. But I didn't know that cold showers make your hair shiny. Yeah,
just cooling. It closes the hair shaft. So you want to start hot and then obviously wash it, shampoo it really well, put the conditioner in, and then that'll seal the cuticles, and then cold rinse at the end. Yeah.
Look at that. Okay. All right. We are biohacking. Let's turn the tables a little bit. What would be one of the biggest mistakes that you see people out there making when they're trying to biohack? Like, how are we messing up the biohack, and we need to avoid this situation?
I think that going like too crazy too quickly. So by crazy is probably not the right word. Going too restrictive, right? You've still got to have fun. Life's still got to be about having fun. I think it's all about a balance, right? So I think people do that and they go quite extreme, like really extreme detoxes or really extreme fasting protocols. And it just makes them stressed and depleted, and they're low on energy, and then their hair doesn't look great and they feel tired. And I think it's about being moderate in your approach, because everything that you do, I really believe in the power of 1%. If you get 1% better each day, over a year, those results just add up and they're amazing. And it's got to be something you stick to over the longer term, because that's key, really. So I would go in. I like to go all in, but I would just go in slowly and just build the blocks on top. And that's how I do it in my programs. It's like, let's just kind of stack these habits so that at the end of 90 days, you kind of feel like you're on fire.
Yes, I love that. 1% better every day, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Angela, I think we've got some people listening in that are definitely interested in connecting with you, exploring your coaching opportunities, the programs that we've mentioned here. So what is the best way to dive into your world? Now you also have a podcast too. So we definitely need to shout that out, because people listening to this show, they're podcast listeners. So podcast, website, where do people get in touch with you, Angela?
Okay, cool. So podcast is High Performance Health Podcast. They can find me pretty much on any platform. My website is Angela Foster Performance. That's got some information just about me. I probably spend most of my time on Instagram. That's Angela S. Foster. So they can connect with me there, DM me. I always love connecting with people. And then the other thing is, if they want to join one of my free live masterclasses that I hold weekly, then that's under my membership site. So they just go to angelafosteracademy.com/masterclass, and they can join me live. I'll talk all about DNA. They can ask me as many questions as they want. And then there's always, generally speaking, I'll put together a good offer if someone wants to join. And if they don't, no sweat, they'll learn a lot anyway, to be honest.
Excellent. And I couldn't help but giggle a little bit, because pre-recording, I told Angela, I really prefer the way that she says the phrase masterclass more than I have the Indiana, it's a masterclass, y'all. And she's like, masterclass. I'm like, it just sounds like so high level. Yeah, exactly. So if I ever have a masterclass, I'm going to have you record the audio for me. And I think my opt-in levels will be so much higher. So Angela, this has been a lot of fun. I've got personally a lot of takeaways. I've got a lot of notes that I'm looking to implement. And I know my audience will as well. So Thank you so much for, making some time for us and, speaking to these people that are hungry for this information that's why I podcast. I go out and I find the people like you, the experts in this area, and I love to bring you in. And I know your time is super valuable. So thank you for adding value to our audience here today.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on the show, Adam.
All right, everybody. And you know what time it is. It's time to set your implementation alarm on your phone. In 1 day from now, 24 hours from right now, what will you have done that will flick over that first domino to create that momentum with that tip that you really got excited about? So maybe it was the Aura Ring. Maybe you're going to dive a little bit deeper in fasting or DNA testing. But what's that thing that you're going to take action on and get out there and own it? Every meal, every workout, every day. I will see you on the next episode. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you got a ton out of it. If you feel like you need a little bit of a boost, a little bit of an accountability buddy, a little bit of coaching, I've got my 28-day coaching program open and ready to help. You can go to millionpoundmission.com and apply. I take a few people each week. I like to stagger them out as we onboard new people so you get maximum attention. We're touching base every week with video chats. We've got a daily Google Doc that I call the Client Hub that we check in with on a daily basis. We really dig in with your macros, your calories, your fitness. I supply all the resources you need in all those areas, and it's supportive accountability to help you burst through that plateau, to reverse your momentum from negative to positive, and really get after those goals that you've been shooting for so long. It's time to go from goal setting to goal achieving, and the 28-day coaching program is the way to get it done. Head on over to millionpoundmission.com and submit your application today.